Alright guys, Game of the Year nominees were just announced a bit ago, and we've got some really promising titles on this list, so I'm assuming it's going to be a pretty intense competition this year. Now, a lot of people have been theorizing about this, and I think it was pretty much a given that Arc Raiders, among a lot of other games, would be included in the list of nominees. However, it hasn't actually been listed for the Game of the Year nomination, it was instead listed in one of the categories. A lot of people wanted Arc Raiders to be considered Game of the Year, and that caused a bit of a stir online. Now, looking at the Game of the Year nominees themselves, I think everyone expected Expedition 33 since that game got crazy popular earlier this year. After that, there's Death Stranding 2, which I admittedly don't know much about. Then there's Donkey Kong Bonanza, Hades 2, which I played the first, and it was really fun. A lot of people are saying sequels shouldn't be entitled to these sorts of nominations, but I don't really see why, since it is a full-fledged game on its own. That argument was also said for Battlefield 6, which was nominated in the same field as Arc Raiders. And after Hades for Game of the Year comes Hollow Knight Silksong, which was such an amazing and long-awaited game. And after that, you've got Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2. So, as you can see, Arc Raiders itself wasn't nominated for Game of the Year. This year has been huge for indie games, and they usually don't nominate multiplayer games for Game of the Year. So unfortunately, even though it does deserve a spot, Arc Raiders didn't make it to those Game of the Year nominations. I personally feel like it deserves a spot up there, but the games nominated are also really good. I think it's tough sometimes for multiplayer games to be considered for Game of the Year because they often don't focus as much on things like story or similar elements that games like Baldur's Gate 3 did. I just tend to find that story-driven, single-player games make it to the top of the nominees for Game of the Year more often than not. And from what I'm guessing, I feel like Expedition 33 might win. It's nominated in I think a ton of the categories beyond even Game of the Year, which means it's really up there as a game. It was really well made, had great sound and performance, and carried a lot of fame throughout the year. A lot of people have called it a once-in-a-generation type game and even compared it to Elden Ring, so I'm sure it'll do really well when the actual decisions come out. It's also pretty surprising because the turn-based RPG style that we see a lot in JRPGs isn't always popular outside of JRPGs. So Expedition 33 did something similar to Arc Raiders in that it made something a bit more niche more popular with everyone. At the end of the day, Expedition 33 had a lot of factors to it that I think make it a bit of a given for Game of the Year. On that note though, Arc Raiders didn't walk away without nominations. In fact, it's in the best multiplayer category. It's sharing that nomination with Battlefield 6, which was really well done this year. Also, there is Elden Ring Night Rain. Then you've got P, which I didn't personally play, but I know got really popular and looks like a pretty fun game. And finally, we've got Split Fiction, which I remember was really popular earlier this year as well. There's a lot of pretty great contenders in this category with Arc Raiders, so it's good competition this year. However, I personally think that Arc Raiders will probably win this category, and I think it makes total sense for it to win as well. Arc Raiders has a very supportive community. Plus, it's got some crazy levels of player retention. It's still hitting peak player counts around 3 weeks in, when you usually will see a player count decline for most multiplayer games. Battlefield 6 is also a big contender, but I think that Arc Raiders did something that's more revolutionary in a way that makes it definitely the best multiplayer of the year. And honestly, the multiplayer aspect of this game was really nice. While it wasn't a multiplayer focused game, the whole PvP aspect added a lot to the gameplay. I mean, it definitely deserves that nomination since it made the PvP in the game feel like you're competing or working beside real people, which made the game feel super cohesive and very alive. The game's sort of mix between the PvP and PvE made it a really good multiplayer and helped diversify the way each run goes. Also, the fact that extraction could very well rely on what happens in your PvP encounters adds a lot of high stakes to the game. Nothing in the PvP system of the game feels very forced, and the connection or fighting you start between players just feels supernatural. It's not like traditional PvP where there's a certain objective and everything just plays the same, and it actually keeps the game interesting. And, you know, the more I look at Steam player counts, the more shocking it gets in just how many people are invested in this game. And that's on Steam alone, so it definitely deserved that multiplayer hype. A lot of players are pissed right now though, since they feel that Arc Raiders at least deserves a nomination in Best Audio Design. For reference, Battlefield 6 got a spot there, along with Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Ghost of Yotei, and Silent Hill F. Arc Raiders had amazing sound design, great music, great enemy sound design, so I feel like it probably deserved a spot there. I think Battlefield 6 did deserve that nomination, since it had equally amazing sound design and balance, but Arc Raiders definitely deserved to be nominated for sound as well. The game is just crazy immersive, and I've even seen a lot of Battlefield players that said Arc Raiders deserved the nomination more. Half the time, especially when playing solo and stealthy in Arc Raiders, you navigate the world and avoid arcs through hearing all the distinctive sounds. Every arc and gunshot and fight that happens is done so well that you can tell what parts of the map to avoid, where to hide, and so on. And that's beside the amazing and distinctive music the game has that force you to lock in the minute you open it. I think it was really robbed of any sort of nomination in sound. I also personally think it should have had a spot in art direction, since the way Arc Raiders was curated was so unique, and the aesthetic really carried on throughout the entire game. Art direction basically had the same nominations as the Game of the Year contenders, excluding Kingdom Come Deliverance and putting Ghost of Yotei there instead. And that same exact list being Expedition 33, Hades 2, Silksong, Death Stranding 2, and Ghost of Yotei were nominated for Best Score and Music. I thought that Arc Raiders might have been released too late this year to even make it into nominations, but since they nominated it in the multiplayer category, I pretty much feel like it was snubbed a bit in the other categories. Multiplayer is definitely a part of Arc Raiders that deserves to be awarded, but it's also not even close to the entirety of the game. Part of the reason people love this game so much is how immersive it is, and to not be nominated in anything regarding that immersive atmosphere, whether it be design or sound or anything of that sort, seems totally off. Either way, I'm also guessing that a lot of the big streamers that have been playing Arc Raiders will encourage their audience to vote in its favor, which it really deserves. So it'll probably take the win in multiplayer. I do still think it should have made it into some sort of sound design category though. A lot of players are also saying that Arc Raiders deserved a spot in the Game of the Year nominations itself, since it was just such an amazing and well-rounded game. What do you think though? Should Arc Raiders have been nominated for Game of the Year? Should it have had a spot in other categories? And do you think it'll win for Best Multiplayer?